What are the ramifications of the Charlie Kirk murder? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that y'all know brings you the principled case for the libertarian philosophy. I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host Richard Ebeling. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to be with you and our viewers and listeners.
Okay, so Richard, the big news, or at least one of the big news, I guess, is the Charlie Kirk murder. And commentators on both sides of the ideological divide, the Democrats, Republicans, I guess libertarians also are weighing in on the controversy. And you've written an excellent article that we've posted on our website on classical liberalism and the Charlie Kirk murder. And we've already gotten some good feedback on that article. So why don't you share with our readers the perspective that you delivered there in that article, and then I'll weigh in with some comments of my own.
Well, most of the commentaries have been fairly reasonable and rational, and about the need for tolerance and civility and turning down of the heat of treating your political and ideological opponents in less demonized terms that easily can result in some who hear such voices who believe that the country, the civilization is threatened by the demon on the other side, and that if this demon is allowed to keep talking or come to power, it'll be the end of all that is good and virtuous based upon how one views these things, and that we need to be open more and less less brutal in our discourse with each other. And obviously all this is true. And I must say, and I never thought I would ever say such a thing publicly. I watched a brief YouTube video by Bernie Sanders, like controlling myself, by Bernie Sanders, and he actually was unbelievably reasonable and calm-headed, saying that violence in general, obviously, but political violence should be no part of a free and open society, where you so classify your opponent that civility, discourse, debate among people of quote goodwill can is pushed off the political arena because everything is the enemy that has to be shut up or done away with. But what I try to talk about in the article is sort of the deeper thing. Why has this radicalized demonization on both, to use the terminology usually used by the left or the right or by progressives and socialists and conservatives on the other side, reach this point? And I try to say it's precisely because a trend that has been going on for over 100 years seems to be accelerating into more and more of the corners of society. And that is the intrusion of government, the politicization of all aspects of everyday life. Um, uh, Obviously, in the economic realm, classical liberals and libertarians emphasize this: government setting or influencing wages and prices, redistributing wealth, attempting to subsidize or prohibit various types of production. That is the economic realms of society. But matching this in parallel, nothing new, but again seems to be accelerating, is the intrusive hand of government into the personal and the private. And I believe that much of the tension that has arisen is because it has seemed to be entering the realm of what people view as the most important to them and the most intimate. That is, your personal identity as a human being, sex and gender, the idea of words to say, relationships you can enter into, fear of social ostracism, and then because of government education, the intensified attempt to monopolize the educational system from kindergarten through higher education of college and university, to see that there's an agenda of a particular worldview imposed upon everyone. Now, once everything is politicized, there's nothing private. And once there's nothing private, there's no arena where individuals can choose to live their way, choose to live a different way, to have one set of ideas, have another set of ideas, have social relationships, and based upon faith, reason, purposes, goals, common ends here, while others move in diverse and different ways. Because now, once everything becomes politicized, it's either my, it's life and death. It's either my way or your way. It's my curriculum that will be imposed upon all people in society. It is my notion of how workplace, and hiring should be done. It's my way of what language should be used and definitions of a human being that will be imposed on everyone. And once we break away from the pluralism of a free and open society in terms of human relationships and courses of action and directions and meanings of life, which you can personally follow on your own and in free and voluntary association with others, then everything becomes like a threat. If they win, they're going to determine how I view myself and what I can say and how I can live and what I can earn and who I can interact with and what ways and with what words, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that it becomes the hyper-politicization of society creates the setting in which everything seems extreme. It's either them or me. It's either us or them. And then if you think that they're winning, and you feel that you cannot defeat them in the intellectual arena, you don't think you have the better argument, or they seem to play rhetorical methods that you cannot match, then you're saying, I have to stop them. They are threatening everything I value, everything I want, everything that I consider important for myself and others in society. And if he really is the devil, if he really is the extreme uh, face of all that I consider good and everything bad and harmful and dangerous to myself and society as a whole, then maybe I need to resort to extreme methods to silence him, including killing. And I believe that you see this. Now, it occurs across the political spectrum, but most recently, though not exclusively, it has been people on the left who have taken this attitude. That fellow who shot down that CEO of a pharmaceutical or insurance company in New York City, the attempt to kill Trump, now the execution through by assassination of Charlie Kirk, the other threats that have occurred. All of this shows the extremities of our society. And what I propose or suggest or call for in the article is basically excuse me, the depolitization of society. Get government out of this. Don't make it either or. Don't make it either my way or your way. The pluralism and the voluntarism and the diversity of a healthy, open, and liberal society in which merely because you hold values different than mine, merely because you want to live or associate with others in a way that is not the one I choose, does not threaten me, does not undermine my ability to pursue and live my values, my purposes, my senses of right, good, and better, because we overlap and we associate when we have common purposes. If we don't, we each move in our own directions, and society becomes less threatened, less demonizing, and in that way, that is the ideal of a classical liberal free society, where each individual has his own recognized rights to his life, liberty, and honestly acquired property, following his own meanings, purposes, and values, and associates with others based upon mutual consent and voluntary agreement. And the overlapping associations of civil society out of this follow pluralistic patterns and that overlap and sometimes don't, but each has the capacity to live their own way with respect for others. And until we take government and politics out of every nook and cranny of human life, from the economic to the social to the personal, et cetera, the dangers of this type of extremism of I have to shut him up, I have to kill him, because if he comes to power or stays in power, it is the end of everything that I cherish, just will get worse and worse.
Well, you obviously make a very strong case for civil society, and your your point about the government intruding so much into our lives, I couldn't agree with you more. For those viewers, I did address my perspective on the Charlie Kirk killing this week in Trump Watch, my half-hour program. So I would invite you to watch that. But one of the points I make in there, Richard, reinforces the point that you're making. I put it a different way than you put it. That I state that there are four factors that are going on here, but one of them is what I call tightening the screws in society, and that the more the government tightens the screws and tightens the screws and tightens the screws in the name of freedom, because everybody believes that this is freedom, where the government's tightening the screw ever more tightly, that it's setting off people that would ordinarily not be doing these things. That's my conviction. I mean, let me share with you some of my concerns about this guy that did this killing. Now, I haven't steeped myself in all the evidence regarding motive. I've read some articles and some. You can correct me if I have any gaps here, but this guy didn't strike me as this ideological communist type that, it's not like he's been reading Das Kapital and Marxism and socialism and communism. And I don't think there's any evidence that he's a member of Antifa. In fact, he grew up in a Republican family. And if there's one thing I know about Republican families, at the dinner table, they are indoctrinating their kids in Republican values. And so this guy comes up and says, from what I can tell, fairly recently, that he's angry at Trump, at Kirk, because he says Kirk's spreading hatred. Well, it turns out that this killer, the 22-year-old guy, his roommate is a guy who's transgendering to female. And from what I read in the press, he's got an intimate relationship with this guy. So it seems to me that Trump's diatribes against transgenders may be playing a role here. When he says that Trump's spreading hatred, I think it's very possible that he's referring to transgenders, almost likely. Well, I don't see that as this huge ideological left versus right debate. Not to mention the fact that, for me, I never felt that there was much difference between conservatives and liberals. I mean, their only difference is how they operate their systems. Like, should the Federal Reserve be independent or should it not be independent? But this guy, when people say, well, he's a leftist attacking Trump, where do they draw that evidence? I mean, maybe he's attacking Trump for being too soft, not enforcing the war on drugs sufficiently, not enforcing the war on immigrants sufficiently. To me, it's not real clear what he's angry about, which raises another issue. And that is the preparation for this. The press said, well, it's clear he's been really preparing for this for a long time, like a week. I mean, a week to prepare an assassination? That doesn't seem like a very long time, especially for an ideologue. You would think that he'd be sitting there for months and months saying, okay, how am I going to figure this out? And then after the shooting, he tosses the rifle in some wooded area. Does he honestly think that he's going to get away with this? I mean, if he really believes that, he's somewhat delusional, because every cop in the world is going to be there, and it doesn't seem like he had an escape plan. He starts talking to his father and says he's going to commit suicide. I mean, that's his way out, to commit suicide. And so here you have this 22-year-old guy who has not only snuffed out the life of a very dynamic, popular person, but he's ruined his own life. He's 22 years old and he's effectively committed suicide. I mean, if he doesn't get the death penalty, he certainly will be in the penitentiary for the rest of his life without possibility of parole. So he has, with this one act, screwed up his entire life. Is that rational? I mean, for what purpose? What does he achieve by it? I don't see that he achieves anything. The conservative movement will go on. There'll be other conservatives spouting conservative principles. He has destroyed his own life in the process of destroying this life. And so, for me, he doesn't really fall in the category of a political ideologue that is steeped in leftism and communism and so forth. To me, he's a misfit. he's what I call an off-kilter person. That you and I disagree with most of what Trump does and conservatives do and Biden and Kamala Harris and Democrats do. But look what we do. We write our articles, we do our podcasts, we do Libertarian Angle. We oppose what they're doing in a logical, civil way. This guy can't do that or doesn't do it. He resorts to this dramatic way of destroying two lives. And I say that person, I don't think he meets the definition of insanity in the legal sense, but I think he meets the definition of an off-kilter person, what I call an off-kilter person. And there's a lot of off-kilter people. As you know, there's more than political assassinations taking place in this country. That woman that was just killed on a train in the South somewhere, she's an immigrant, and this guy on the train just kills her out of no motive, at least no apparent motive, just random killing. That guy that killed those children in Minneapolis, that wasn't a political killing. That's just an irrational killing. And it's my thesis that this is one of the factors that's triggering these off-kilter people is this tightening of the screw. The government's so heavily involved with controlling people's lives and convincing them that the tightening of the screw is freedom, that it's setting off a trigger. And in my Trump Watch, I cite three other factors that are involved here. But I think tightening the screw in the name of freedom is one of the factors. It's triggering something in these off-kilter people that's motivating them to do what are really highly irrational acts.
Well, obviously, the young man has chosen a path that is just saying ruined another person's life and his family's life as well as his own. Uh, but I would just say is that what happens here, and there's guilt on both sides. He from what has come out, as I gather, I just follow the news like you, that has been made public information about email exchanges on one of these social sites that he had with his quote significant other unquote. That he said I'm not going to get the wording right, but it was something to the fact that there are some people you just can't argue with anymore. Basically, say you just kill them. Now, why? And even with a madman, there's method to the madness. He has concluded that because people like Charlie Kirk refuse to accept that gender is fluid, that your biology has less relevance than how you want to view yourself, and that you have to both be tolerant of and endorse and accept people who want these gender changes, and that if you don't want to accept them, you somehow are an extremist. You're evil. You're now that's a two-sided thing. Okay, you want to be tolerant. Why are you intolerant of those who look at human life and male and female differently than you? Now, in the free society, which is my point, you want to associate with people who define gender and understand gender as basically historically for thousands of years in general, gender as male and female. Those are the associations in which that are important to you. You choose to overlap. If there are people or situations in which you find that objectionable, you don't associate with them. That's the advantage of the decentralization and the pluralistic nature of voluntary civil society. But young men and many like him think that because conservatives say you're wrong, there's only male and female, that somehow is an offense to them, and that they don't have to respect people who don't share their fluidity views. Now, where they are right, but this is just the flip side. Not only do the transgender people insist, the ideologues, okay, the ideologues, you not only must be tolerant of us, this has to be the way it is. You have to accept me in everything you do as a person, you have to work with me in a certain way, you have to associate with me, you have to socialize with me. You must accept me. Well, no, I don't have to accept you at all, any more than you have to accept the person who doesn't accept transgenderism in the way you do. Okay? But the problem with the conservatives, and this is the other side of the screws that you are using that metaphor for. It's not that the Charlie Kirks in the world want to say there's only two sexes, and I refuse to accept that. You may call yourself Napoleon, but you're not Napoleon. Okay. As a little kid, you may have waved your arms and said, I'm a bird. And people have said, what a creative imagination. But if you do that at 30 or 40 years of age, most people think that you need a little help if you think you're a bird. I don't want to accept that. But the problem is that the Charlie Kirk, certainly some of them, and in fact, some issues him himself, from the clips I watched, it's not enough to say I don't want to accept that there are, Heinz 57 genders. Uh, I think that the law must reflect, and we should socially attempt to force everyone to only view as if there's only two genders. That is the other side of dogmatic intolerance of the other view and the decentralization of association, belief, and interaction. So the failure to differentiate between the two types of perspectives of someone like Charlie Kirk. I think there's two genders. I just think you're wrong. You do your thing, I do mine, versus what's behind a lot of the conservative ideology. There's only two genders, and I'm going to make the law narrowly defined that anyone who thinks differently is going to be viewed as having no legal status in the sense of action, contract, association, acceptance, recognition. And is that coming together, you have to accept Heinz 57 genders. No, there's only two genders. And the state must be somehow brought into play to impose one field on the other. That, more than anything else, in my opinion, is what's causing these situations where, well, if that's it, I'm going to kill you before you kill me.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between state action and private
Yeah.
action. That as libertarians, we would say, what role does the state have, punishing people for being transgender? Now, we're not talking about children. We're talking about only adults here. If somebody decides to change his gender, that's his business. What role does the government have in this? But then there's the private sector where there are problems that arise in the private sector. We all know that, like sports activities or bathroom activities. And how are these resolved? Well, as libertarians, we would say these problems arise in context of every society, but let the market will determine these. Negotiation, the owner decides. People can boycott if they don't like the policy. The free market's a great resolver of disputes. The problem I see with conservatives in the private sector is that they seem to spend a lot of time obsessed about people who are living their lives in ways that they don't choose, like a transgender. When a person changes his gender like that, I don't think he violates anybody's rights. He's making a decision on his own life. And yet, conservatives seem to spend an obsessively large amount of time obsessing over that and condemning them and telling them that they're sinning and whatever. To me, you're better off working on yourself, trying to improve yourself instead of sitting around trying to judge everyone else. And I think in the process of doing that, sometimes it sets off these off-kilter people. And see, your point is very good about this guy. He got set off by this. I think that was the major thing here. I don't see that as a big political difference, like ideological difference between left and right, which I don't see much difference anyway. But I mean, this wasn't over, the welfare state or the national security state or the assassinations that the U.S. government carries out or civil liberties or the things that you and I discuss as part of our libertarianism. It seems to me that this might be a personal thing. This guy got personally offended with Kirk's diatribes against transgenderism and decided, oh, well, he hates my roommate. Maybe he hates me too, and I'm going to take him out. But notice how irrational it is. What does he accomplish with it? Which is what I started out saying is that, okay, so he wipes out Kirk, kills him, snuffs out his life. To what end? What does he accomplish with this? He's never going to do it again, that's for sure. The conservatives will continue bashing transgenders. This murder is not going to stop that. And so this guy has effectively gone off the deep end. and ruined, he destroyed one life, but he's destroyed his own life as well. And as you point out, it really hurt his family as well. And he may still get his own life snuffed out with the death penalty. All to what avail? I mean, what motivates somebody to do something that has no rational end to it?
Well,
Uh,
I think that there, you see, again, the method in the madness. I believe that often because of the rhetoric that's used in our political discourse today, if you really believe that this person represents the ideas of Nazism or racism or Hitler, then, you know, would it have been irrational to go out and try to assassinate Hitler? Not if you think that that would disrupt the existence or the structure or the workings of the Nazi system. Now, if you think that someone like Charlie Kirk, I'm just trying to rationalize what could be in this guy's mind. If you believe that he is an in-your-face, articulate person who goes around the country talking to students in such a way that he has the rhetorical and charismatic capacity to move people more in his direction and away from the one you prefer, then this is a voice that's going to be attempting to marginalize and then legally and politically threaten what you consider right and just. And it set an example. You kill him, it could be the next one. I'm just saying this is what goes through a person's mind. I really think, and this has a lot to do with it. You know, you were mentioning the bathroom business. That this is part of it. Should should a male who identifies himself as female be allowed to use a female bathroom or locker room? Well, both sides of the conservative left spectrum want to have the state decide this. You may or may not. I mean, Charlie Kirk is very clear. Oh, would you want a man to be in a woman's locker room ogling at her, implying that the law should prohibit it? The other fellow, if he sincerely believes that he's a woman inside a man's body, and this is his true self, then he's just being where he thinks he belongs in all and different facets of life. And if each side says they will be in the bathroom, no, they won't be in the bathroom, and you think the state is going to be brought into play to determine this, well, that sets up this conflict of violence.
you know, on the bathroom debate, I was at an airport somewhere. I forget where. I think it was on the West Coast a while back, and having to use the bathroom. And I go to one, I guess it was a government owned airport. I mean, I think all airports are government owned, but it was a bisexual bathroom, both men and women. I thought, wow, I've never been to one of those before. And so I had to try that out. And yeah, they had closed stalls, both men and women coming and going. I thought, well, that seems like a nice solution to all this. It's just have one bathroom for both sexes. Uh, but in any event, that's an aside. Um, yeah, your point about the fascists and the Hitler and stuff is a good point. I mean, and he had on his bullets something about fascism, bullet cartridges. But I wonder really how steep this guy is in the ideology of fascism and Nazism and stuff, and how rational he really is. I got my doubts. I got a feeling that he is not well steeped in ideological things at all. He's not well educated. And it could be that he just got set off with the transgender thing bashing that Kirk might have been engaged in, and then just goes off on this whole flight of fascism and hatred across America, and he's spreading it and so forth. But again, that gets back to my point. It's just not rational. I mean, you and I may get upset over some issue here and some issue there, but we don't go out and start killing people. And I know there's transgenders here in the libertarian movement, in the academic world, that at least one I know of, that there's high degree of respect and tolerance to her, and there's no bashing. And so I think most people respond to this type of thing, even if they vehemently disagree with it, in a very civilized manner of criticizing it, disagreeing with it, going on Facebook or Twitter, even if it's diatribes with profanity and stuff, they don't resort to killing. And
Well,
I think this killing
the
thing is very, very weird.
well, I think that. part of it is that the emotiveness that comes from often aspects of the left. I've ended up watching more of these Charlie Kirk things on YouTube than I had watched before. And while everyone sort of praises him, right, you say nice things about those who have passed away. I don't always find him as polite and courteous and deferential in these exchanges with students as I think as a professor one should be. But that's a different matter. That's a style. But what I find out in watching some of these, the student will come up and say, you have fascist or Nazi ideas. And he just asks them a question. What is a fascist? What is a Nazi? What is anti-democratic? What is democracy? And they can't answer. They're just emotive. They in their mind, Nazi means evil. They have been told in venues of the media, of their classroom, that people like Charlie Kirk are fascists and Nazis. Would you want Nazism to control America? No. Why? No, that's bad. People will kill people. You're a Nazi. But they don't know what these concepts mean. The amount of intellectual ignorance on the part of these students. And I know it's clips that they've chosen to put up, and they may not be fully representative, but there are enough of them that the point that this is just a emotive response to rhetoric. They don't know what these concepts mean or what they're for and against. There's no intellectual substance of reason, argument, and historical understanding behind a large part of these young people. They're just set off by what their teachers tell them, and that is a major problem.
Well, and that gets back to the whole public schooling thing, which I think is part of the screw job that takes place. I mean, that's where the indoctrination, people aren't taught to think, they're taught to memorize, they're taught to defer. And I can easily imagine a person that doesn't know how to analyze, doesn't know how to debate, doesn't know how to discuss, getting all upset. You see this on Twitter all the time. This is why I hate Twitter, because people do not know how to defend their positions, and so they resort to profanity and anger, and you can just see them getting really frustrated because they can't defend their position. And that, I assume that's what Kirk was good at, was challenging people to defend their position, which they were not able to do. But most people would just walk away in frustration or anger or name calling or profanity. They don't resort to killing, and that's what just that's where I think America needs to do some serious soul searching, is what's causing people to resort to violence, not only on this political side, but like the killing of those children. What's that all about? The killing of that woman on that train, the other mass killings. And I think we need to do some serious soul searching about getting down to the real root of why all this dysfunctional conduct, including look at the suicide rate among young people, soaring. What's that all about? Why are people in supposedly a free and great and prosperous society checking out early? Or the drug addiction. There's massive drug addiction. Why are people, going off on flights of fancy with mind-altering substances in what is supposed to be a very harmonious, happy society? I think we need to go deeper, and that's sort of what I was doing in Trump Watch this week, is trying to go down deeper and figure out why is this society such a sick society? Because I don't think anybody can deny it's a sick society based on the things that I just mentioned.
I'll just pick up, I know time we're closing here, but the importance of, the educational establishment, the institutions, and its governmental nature. See, this is the problem. People like Charlie Kirk have felt that, quote, the left have captured the intellectual environment in higher education. Well, like for every one Republican or conservative, there's like 100 lefties and Democrats, which is true from the data. But rather than saying, let's get government out of education, let's put education totally in the private sector from kindergarten through the PhD. Let the market sort this out. What kind of colleges and universities, what kind of curricula, the selection of professors, given the interests, wants, and desires of parents and the students themselves for an education. No, what the conservatives want, oh, you've controlled the curriculum and the hiring. Well, we want, in a sense, a form of reverse affirmative action. A certain amount of conservatives, a certain amount of Christian fundamentalists on the faculty. It's their attempt to control the institution through the state as much as the people who they oppose. And that's, again, separating the political from the private, the state from the social. And unless we do that, this is going to continue.
On that very insightful note, we'll wrap things up. Thank you very much, Richard. I greatly enjoyed the conversation. As always, thank you all for tuning in. And as always, thank you for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Richard, look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.